Hey there. Welcome to another episode of Teach the People. I am Areshia McFarland, your host. Today's guest is my dear friend and three-time NBA champion, Mr. BJ Armstrong. BJ is one of the nation's leading sports agents in basketball, and he's going to talk to us about what life after basketball has been for him, and also what he thinks the role of an athlete is in today's society. I hope that you'll enjoy another episode of Teach the People. Hey, BJ. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. You're looking good. Don't look like the corona's gotten to you.
Well, we're just taking it one day at a time. And again, thanks for having me on, and hope all is well on your end as well.
It is. Welcome to Teach the People. We appreciate you spending some time with us today so we can look, listen, and learn a little bit more about life in the NBA. How's that sound?
Right. Sounds good.
So let me just start out by asking, what are you doing to stay busy these days? How are you maneuvering in the quarantine? And we know that it's had a huge effect on sports. What effect has it had on you?
Well, like everyone else, we're just taking it one day at a time and trying to gather as much information as we potentially can. And most importantly is health and safety is at the forefront of our family. So nothing out of the ordinary other than just taking measures to be responsible, be accountable in our community and the global community that we all exist in, and really just trying to really see and how we're going to get through this and do our part. We have 3 kids, so we all have our issues that we have to deal with individually within our families, within our family structure, and just trying to address the needs. So nothing out of the ordinary other than just holding ourselves accountable and doing what we have to do to get through this.
I hear that. And there is a lot going on when we start thinking about sports coming back and everybody's looking at the safety precautions and everything that's taking place. We know that the NBA is about to get started again. All the guys going down to the bubble. How do you feel about that? What do you think of players going down there and trying to play in these conditions?
Well, I think it's an extraordinary effort by the NBA to try to pull this off. And, you have to give them credit, the detail, everything that they're going through with the, the difficulty of trying to pull this off. So we'll see how this plays out. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts here. I mean, you have thousands of people that will be working not only in front of the camera, behind the camera, trying to really make sure that this goes. We know there's going to be bumps, but really trying to make sure they get from the start to the finish. So you have to give them credit for this, the effort that they're putting forth, and we'll see how it works out. It seems like the players now have been down there for a couple of days, and from everything I can see, they're adjusting to life. It's amazing how young people adjust to what they have to do, and so here they are. They're down there, and I think they're getting themselves ready in condition mentally and physically to start playing.
Yeah, and they have a lot on their plates, right? Now, BJ, just so that everyone understands, you are one of the top agents in basketball right now, right? And so your job is to advocate for your players. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, advocating here and helping guide these young men through things that they will encounter. And most importantly is to be another voice within their team structure to help them make the decisions that they're going to go through. So it's been a good transition for me as an ex-player to move into this space. And so it's been great for me to still be around the game and really do what I do and be able to work with these young men in this capacity.
How did you even get into the world of deciding that you wanted to be an agent? Like, having been a player and a very successful one at that, how did you make the transition?
That's a great question. I get asked this question quite often. And I think it was just my curiosity as a young kid of trying to understand how this business really works. And, growing up playing and growing up in the city of Detroit, I always loved the game. I loved playing and was introduced to the game at a very young age. But I was always aware that there was a business aspect of it. So when I started getting recruited, I just wanted to understand the environment in which I was walking into. Playing basketball was always fun for me, but all of a sudden now I was asked to do something, and I was understanding that collegiate sports in its own right is a business. And then if I was going to play beyond that, I wanted to understand that business, and I wanted to understand how the arenas were being built, the uniforms, the shoes, television, the global impact that the game is having and it's currently having today. So I was just this young, curious kid to really want to understand this business. And without me really thinking about it, I think it was just a natural transition for me to go from player to working in the front office to now working with players in the agent capacity, but always being around the game. So always asking the questions and always trying to figure out how does it really work, and kind of tinkering with that idea has allowed me to become an agent.
Wow. So even at that very early age, you were already thinking down the line, like what does life after basketball look like?
Well, I don't know if I was so much thinking about what life after basketball looked, but I was interested, like, you know, why is this Gatorade sign here? Like, you would go to the arena and you would see, Gatorades on the cup. And then when we would do the interviews, you would see, why would they place a Gatorade bottle right in front of you? Why was Chevrolet suddenly the signage in the buildings, or what have you, Coca-Cola? So I was just always interested in, why things were there. As everyone else was kind of playing, I was just more interested in, like, oh, how did this get here? Why is this arena called the United Center? Like, how did United Airlines get here? Why is American Airlines here? Or, why is it called, Madison Square Garden? So it was just, for me, always looking beyond and just kind of like saying, okay, there has to be something to it. Why did Nike or Adidas, why some players wear Nikes? Why did some players wear Adidas? Why did some players wear Pumas? So I was just like, oh, okay, what's going on here? And let me see how it works.
Interesting. So if I'm a parent of a child or an elite athlete, as it would be, that is looking at a life in the NBA, and I'm sure you run across young guys all the time that are just about to make their foray into the professional arena, what sort of advice do you give them? Like, even if it's not going to be someone that you take on as a client, when you see these young men who are most oftentimes African American, what do you tell them? What is the advice that you give to them?
Well, the game has really grown. The popularity of the game is really at an all-time high. And because the game is popular, now you have more and more people that have this dream to play in the NBA. And but the reality is, it's only 300 or so jobs, 300 or 400 jobs. And now the competition for those jobs is probably as great as it's ever been, because now you truly have a global game. And what does that mean? A third of the league now, let's just say it's 400 or so jobs, are foreign-born players. Now, that's great business for the NBA because you truly have a global game, right? You have players from Slovenia, you have players from Brazil, you have players from Italy, so forth and so on. But a third of those players now are all foreign-born players, which means they're taking jobs that were traditionally for domestic players like myself. Okay, so even though the game has grown and it's good business for the NBA, there are less jobs, especially for the domestic players and people who are born here. So, and because of that, now the competition is that much greater, and it's as high as it's ever been. What do I tell players? It's just a math equation, right? If I go into a college locker room to this day, and I always ask these players, when friends of mine ask me to speak to their teams or speak to young people, say, how many of you guys want to play professional basketball? How many of you guys think you're going to play? It never fails that every player in that room is going to raise their hand. It's an amazing phenomenon, but mathematically, it's impossible for every one of these players to play. So you just got to understand, you got to have these real conversations with yourself, right? And, I'm not here to destroy anyone's dreams or tell them what they can and can't do. But when you look at the math, right, there are millions and millions and millions of people on the planet that all would like to play, especially young men. They have these aspirations to play professional sports. but mathematically, when you look at it, it's impossible. Someone's not going to make it. And every year you have to have this conversation with yourself. And those who do make it, they're incredibly gifted. They're incredibly gifted players. And now, because the game is so popular, everyone feels, as they should, that they have an opportunity to play, but that's just not the case. So I always encourage people to just have these one-on-one conversations with yourself so you can understand that mathematically you have less than a zero, probably 0.01% to actually make it or play in the NBA, let alone have a career in the NBA, I should say.
Well, now that brings up an interesting question, because if we're talking about a global game, why then do you think basketball of all sports is so heavily dominated by African American men as players? What is that about?
I have no idea. When I go around the world, I mean, I see the world playing the game. I think if we just look at it from the perspective of what it looks like here in the United States, you'll see the way the game is played, I think has an impact on the players who play the game, right? So the game is about speed and quickness. Now the game is about pace and space. And I think here we can say that, but when you truly go around the world, the game is played by everyone. And that's what makes it interesting. So I've had it, I'm incredibly, I've been blessed in that regard, is that I had a chance to look around the world to see. And I played here. I grew up here in the United States, but truly it's a global game. And when I go to China, when I go to Europe, when I go to other places around the world, you see that there's so many people playing basketball. And but that's what you see here in the NBA or, in NCAA. And I think that's what we're kind of become accustomed to looking at and seeing it from our perspective.
When you think about team ownership in the NBA specifically, and there have been so few, like to date, two majority owners that are African American, what is that about? Why do you think, if you have a sport that's dominated by African American men, and these are very coveted positions, they're very few to have, you said there are very few jobs, less than 300, why then do we not have more African American ownership in the game?
Well, I just think it's very simple. I think it just comes down to wealth, and more times than not, you need generational wealth to be able to acquire or accumulate these teams. And this isn't something that you just say, "Hey, I want to buy a team." It takes a tremendous amount of resources to be able to put yourself in position, one, to buy these teams, and then be able to run it. So I think now, as we have to play, need to understand the business of the game. And I think over time, you'll see more and more people that will be in position to be able to buy one of these teams. And I think it will happen, now you're seeing, people like Michael Jordan, put themselves in a position to be not just a minority owner, but the majority owner. So it takes time, and, it takes time to build that type of wealth so that you can put yourself in position to be able to do something like that.
Do you think that the same is true, though, for non-African American people? Like, are they men who are buying these teams? Are they coming from generations and generations of wealth? And I mean, obviously, we know they come from a place of privilege, but do they have an easier time of it in purchasing a team?
Well, those are I don't know the financial backgrounds of these people. But what I do know is that, when you talking about putting yourself in those type of positions, you have to there's a certain type of financial understanding or financial thing that you really, you're into a place that takes when you're just trying to earn money. I take myself, for example, there wasn't any wealth coming from generations within my family. This was a generational thing where, I was the first in my family to graduate college. So beginning to understand long-term investment, beginning to understand how to build wealth. So for me, this is a first generation for our family, and to move on so that now my kids, and then hopefully my kids' kids and my kids' kids' kids would have an opportunity to do these things. So again, in understanding the economics and how economics work, the capitalistic society in which we live in, you have to understand how to build that, right? Slow and steady is the race, and you continue to do that. So for me, it was just understanding how it is and how I look at it, and understanding how it works. Is it possible to hit the lottery? Absolutely. That's possible. But what works is you have to continue to have a plan. You have to be very strategic in the way you think about it. And when you understand how, wealth works in this country and how wealth works in the world economy, you understand how to build it. And you have to build that steady, slow and steady. And then, you keep turning the wheel, and hopefully it works out in the end.
Invest and reinvest. So back to the topic of obviously having so many players be African American and so few owners are African American. Do you feel like from your perspective, having been a player and now on the other side of the game, do you think that the NBA as an organization is currently doing enough to support African American communities and their players in this day and age, this climate that we live in where racial injustice is at the forefront? Do you think that the NBA is doing its part?
Well, I think the NBA has been very aware that African American men have played a significant role in their business. And when I say their business, in the business of playing in the NBA. And right. So there has always been an awareness of that. There's been a collaboration of cultures. There's been a collaboration of trying to understand each other and their participation and how they're going to do this. So, what is their role that they should be doing? Hey, who am I to say? They are in this business to do their business. But what I can say is that all of these young men who played certainly have had an opportunity to understand the things that they need to do, and their working relationship that they'll have in their business life, and what they can do and translate into the communities in which not only that they're currently playing in, right? So, they go to these communities and they play, but their responsibilities is what they can do, and having that opportunity to do something on a much larger scale. So I think it all kind of works hand in hand. And many of these organizations, again, are beginning to understand the problems that maybe they didn't have to face 30, 40 years ago. But now you can look at today, I never would have thought 30 years ago that I would have ever seen a Black Lives Matter on an NBA court.
Right.
So you can see the collaboration and the communication that you have between the differences of the cultures, right? But in the same time, you can see where it's going, because there is understanding. Without communication, there can be no cooperation. Without cooperation, they can't get to a collaboration. So there's definitely dialogue there. There's definitely an understanding there. And the NBA has been one of the many have been at the forefront of helping to understand and get the communication that's out there. So you can see a lot of things that they're doing. Is it enough? Who am I to say is it enough? But are they communicating and moving in the right direction, and at least talking about things? Absolutely. Do you see young people being able to do things on a much grander scale than, let's say, 20, 30 years ago? Absolutely. Are they doing things, being able to pour back into their communities? Absolutely. So you see progress, and but you know what? I don't know if there's ever will be enough. I don't know whose responsibility, but the responsibility ultimately lies within us to understand what needs to be done, because now we're beginning to have this economic freedom, if you will, by the salaries and things that we have, that we can invest back in ourselves and in our communities and do what we have to do.
So I'm going to push back just a little bit, because I do. What do you think the responsibility of the athlete is? Because, historically, like, this is kind of the first time where it's been popular to step up and say, hey, what's going on is wrong. And you've seen a lot of athletes lose their positions, lose their jobs, basically, because they did speak out when they saw an injustice at a time when it wasn't comfortable. And so now you have athletes that obviously, en masse are coming out and saying that we've got a problem here. What do you think the responsibility of the athlete is? Obviously, things weren't as easy back when you were playing, but now there's a platform for it. So, for players who are active right now, what is their responsibility in what's going on in addressing the needs of the African American community?
Well, I always look at it, it's like that basketball you have in the background there, right? As long as
You notice?
so long as the air is in that ball,
Yeah.
the player has a platform. But what happens to that player when the air comes out of the ball? So, as long as the player is playing, he's this star player, he's this athlete. When the air comes out, who is that player? And truly, I never see the player that's playing in that uniform, because the player that's playing that uniform is a person. It's just a person. That's all it is, no more, no less. So the uniformity of how or what we should do has never been there. And what I mean by that, right? So on one hand, you had Malcolm X, who had his way of dealing with it. And on the other hand, you had a person like Martin Luther King. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's just whatever you feel comfortable expressing yourself. You have people who maybe like to verbalize what they like to say. Some people like to write what they like to say. Some people may have another way of expressing themselves, right? Whether it's through song or poetry or what have you. So the uniformity of saying this is the athlete's role, or this is, these are people. And within people, you're going to have a wide range of way of expressing themselves. And I never look at the athlete. That athlete is it's fleeting. It comes, it goes, right? You're popular for 1 minute and then you moved on. So the one thing that I always try to have, or at least try to always recognize with these athletes, is that whatever you feel comfortable doing, you feel comfortable, because you have to be comfortable with yourself. You have to be comfortable with how you're going to express yourself. And more importantly, doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just as long as you feel comfortable and your awareness is all that really matters. So whatever it is, it is. And then you try to help these young people grow, express themselves, whatever they feel comfortable expressing. And then you move on and you support them. So it doesn't make it right and doesn't make it wrong. And I never like to put, well, an athlete's role is not to put these people in a box, because they are people and people have to deal with whatever issues they have to deal with. And I'm not pretending to know their backstory or what it is they feel comfortable doing or what they don't feel comfortable doing. And that's how I look at it.
There are a lot of there's a lot of conversation going around now about when is the right time to start having conversations about race with young people. Obviously, we're slapped in the face with it these days, and we're having to approach it head on. You're a father, you have 3 children. Have you had the conversation about race with your children? Do you think it's appropriate yet? Are you waiting till until a particular time to do it? What's your take on that?
Well, I just let life happen how it happens, right? I don't say at 10 they should know this, or 11. Look, people grow at their own time, and they do what they do, right? As human beings, I'm always open to whatever happens. I take life as it comes. So the big thing is to be a great listener and to listen and allow, in particular in our house, is to listen to our kids. They have views, they have opinions, they share their thoughts. And, one of the things I learned in leadership is that when people start bringing you their problems, then that eliminates you as the leader. So I never thrust on what I think or what you should be doing. Hey, you bring your problems. Let's talk about your problems. Let's understand the way you're thinking about them. And my role is, as I see it as a parent, is to help these young people have a way to think about the world and the world in which they live in. So I never thrust my views. I never thrust my opinions. I never thrust how I feel. It's just like allowing people to grow at their own time and giving them the support that they need, but more importantly, feeling comfortable about who they are, what they are. And if they are 20, when they need to have that talk, that's fine. Some people may need it at 14. Some people may need it at 16. Some people may need it later. Some people may not get it at all. But the key is allowing those people to feel comfortable enough to say, you know what, I can go talk to him or I can go talk to her. So we try to be great listeners in our house. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has an opinion. And at some point, when you're ready to hear what you need to hear, you'll hear it.
Okay. You got the good politically correct answers, BJ.
Well, I don't know if they're politically correct. Is my whole life I've been in groups, and when you're in a group or you come from a large family, it's easy to just say this is what the group does. But within that group are individual thoughts. Right. Within this team are individual people. Right? So I don't have a uniform on now. I'm the same person then than I am right now. But the sad part about it was when people see me, people always say, oh, you're BJ, the former player. Mm-hmm. No, I'm not. That's just what I did. That's not who I am. I just did that. That was part of it, right? That's part of the story. That was part of, what I did, right? But I never identified with that superstar. I never person did at that particular time. So it's very important for people to not get lost that play professional sports or anything that you do, is just understanding that's your business. Mm-hmm. That was my line of business. I wasn't like a part of like, I'm not walking around going, hey, look at me, this is what I did. That was part of my, that was a small part of my life, a small portion of my life. And then you move on. So I think as you grow, as you begin to develop, mm-hmm. You understand where you're at in life, right? As a 20-year-old, that's where I was at. At 52, I rarely talk about it other than when it's brought to my attention.
So let me ask you this, that you bring up a very interesting perspective. Everybody looks at NBA players and they think y'all got the life. Oh my gosh, he's making millions of dollars. He's got all the money. He travels. He's all over the world to access, right? That's the ultimate dream. Is it, and I've lived long enough to know the way glitters ain't always gold. When you look at your experience as a player, did you ever have to face, what was the adversity that you had to face? And let's just say specifically from a race perspective, as a celebrated athlete, I mean, you're a 3-time NBA champion, top of the world. You played with the best of them. What did you ever come into contact or ever come face to face with any sort of racial aggressions?
Look, that's unavoidable. So that question is,
well, most people would think that like who's gonna be rooting for it?
Well, I think I don't know. I don't like to say most people. I don't like to generalize.
Yeah.
But in my world, it is what it is. Right? In my world, it is what it is. So I'm not here, money, basketball, or fame or fortune. That doesn't exclude anyone. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exclude anyone, right? So I never suddenly thought, well, I'm different now because I'm playing in the NBA. This is not changing.
So give me an example without names. You don't have to trudge up, any bad, we don't want to put anything out. But what's an example of maybe something that you experienced?
It's every day. It's coming into an arena. If I come into an arena and I'm coming into a visiting arena and someone will say, Oh, let him in. He's okay. He's a player. Okay, so you can take that a number of ways.
Wow. But is that more of a security thing, though?
Whatever it is, what it is. I'm not here to. I'm not here to say what the security guard is thinking or the people. It just is what it is. It's numerous examples of every single day of understanding. Okay, I don't. I never ever bought in to that. I'm somehow different because I played in the NBA. That I wasn't buying into that trick.
You weren't the average player, BJ. I mean, like everybody knows who BJ Armstrong is. It's not like you got lost in the mix.
Well, I mean, again, that could be a perspective. I was just very aware of how I grew up and my principles of how I grew up, and that was not changing. And to this day, that's not changing. I can have $1 trillion. It's not changing. That's not moving. That's just what I did. Yeah, that's just what I did. But again, you know, I wasn't buying into fame. I wasn't buying into fortune. I wasn't buying into I'm living this life. I wasn't buying into it. I was trying to understand this life. I was trying to understand this very small moment in time, because the thing that I was very aware of is that I didn't grow up like that. See, I didn't grow up staying in the Ritz-Carlton. I didn't grow up on private planes. I didn't grow up with hundreds of pair of sneakers. Okay. I didn't grow up like this. So why was I going to get comfortable as acting as if, oh, this is how it is now, and somehow I'm different? I didn't grow up this way. So it just, okay, this is what I do. I'm seeing it. I'm understanding it. I want to understand what is the long term, how did this come? Someone's making money.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just understanding the world in which I was exposed to, because my family didn't grow up like this. So I wasn't impressed by this. Like to this day, I'm not impressed. I'm not wearing watches. I don't wear jewelry. I don't wear any of that.
You're not balling out of control, BJ?
I don't, there's, because someone was figuring out financially how to benefit from this. So I wasn't impressed by all of these things. And that was just my take on it. So, okay, this is what I did. I played, I did my job, and then I went home. So that was just where I understood it.
Is it fair to say, though, because you spent more time outside of the league than you were ever in the league, and more time, obviously, as an adult than you spent as a child, I would imagine that you would have gotten used to the lifestyle. I would think that just things would be different. Is that not the case?
No, not for me. I mean, my family, I know, like my family, right? It was, okay, this is, you know, when I was coming up, I had great family members. I had great friends. And I was very lucky in this regard. I had both my parents who prepared me for this moment. And so I just did my thing. I wasn't impressed by all of these things. I wasn't impressed by the business. I understand the marketing of it. I understood financially how it worked. I understood, you know, my role in it. I was very fortunate to have a career, which is highly unusual when someone plays, 10 or more years. So again, this wasn't something that I thought was normal. I could see how young people could get trapped into that. But for me, okay, I understood it. I was appreciative. I wanted to be respectful to other people because I wanted them to respect me. I wanted them to respect me, not just this uniform or not just this person who entertained them on their television or wherever they happen to see me in a basketball arena, but to see the person behind it, right? Because there was a person behind all of this who they didn't know, who many times they don't care to know. They just like, oh, that's that guy who played and that he did these things. But, they never engaged me in the sense where they want to know anything else about me other than, Oh yeah, you won a game. Oh yeah, you played with such and such. So to me, the the shallow communication of just talking about basketball, okay, we can do it. I can play that.
Yeah.
But I'm just sitting here listening to people because there's a lot more things that this person did to get here than
Yeah.
just score a couple of baskets in a basketball game.
So now that you are on the other side, right? Like you're not in the uniform every day and you're working, you're an agent. Obviously it's not a field that's dominated by Black people. So you probably often, I often talk about being the only in the room. I imagine you've experienced that quite a great deal. Do you find though, because of who you were and what you did in the past, that translated now into your life as a sports agent? Do you have to be conscious of being Black in that role, or do you feel like people truly see you for your abilities and what you bring to the table now?
Well, being conscious about being Black, I am that. So I'm not. I don't go around and say, oh, I don't have to remind myself. Oh, like I'm that 24 hours, 7 days a week.
I get that. Somebody told me once. This guy said, I'm reminded. He not that he forgot, but he's like, when I take off this suit, when I'm not in my working capacity, when I'm not doing what people are used to me doing, and I'm just the Black guy at the gas station pumping gas, I still have to be cautious. I have to look around. I have to, be mindful of my surroundings. If the cops pull me over, I know it could be a problem. Like, do you concern yourself with those sort of things, or now are you at a place?
Look, I'm here where, again, I grew up in a city. I'm so thankful that I grew up in a city like Detroit, because Detroit has always been a very conscientious city in many regards to a lot of different things.
Motown.
And whether it's Motown, whether it's the riots, it's been the host of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So for us who grew up in the city of Detroit, look, we were at one point, we were one of the fourth, fifth largest cities in America. Mm-hmm. At one point when I grew up there. So this isn't anything new to us up there. And I'm very thankful for that, because I saw Black school teachers, I saw Black mayors, I saw Black superintendents, I saw Black excellence, right? Barry Gordy. I'm not all of a sudden, oh wow, like growing up in the city of Detroit, I saw me. So I'm not impressed by all of this. I'm not into this. Like, I'm not into like, oh wow, no, this is how I grew up. All right. When I grew up, I was around people that look like me, people who excel like me, people who were driven like me, and people who, when I didn't do right, my neighbors made sure that truly it was a village. Mm-hmm. Growing up in the city of Detroit, right? It was 3-4 million of us. Okay, so this is how I grew up. So I am aware and comfortable with who I am, and I'm not changing for that. I'm not looking around going, I need a reminder, or no, I get it. I get what it is. I understand what it is. I'm not trying to change the world, but I am aware of the perceptions of the world. I'm not naive to the world. Mm-hmm. I'm not surprised with anything I see anymore.
What does true progress look like for you? Like, if you had to say, here's some benchmarks that, if 20 years from now, we're no longer talking about X, Y, Z, we've made progress.
Well, you're talking about equality. You're talking about people having opportunities. You're talking about all the things, systemic racism and all the things that we're currently having discussions about, right? You're talking about treating people, like in the humanity, right? We're talking about humanity, human beings. You're talking about everyone having an opportunity, having a seat at the table. So that's what you're hoping to see. That's it. What more can you ask for? You just want an opportunity. You want an opportunity to be treated with respect. And And that's what you want. I mean, that's I don't think there's anything, um, what we've seen thus far. I think, we understand our history, especially in the Black culture. We understand our history. We understand the hundreds and hundreds of years of oppression and the things that we've had to overcome to get to this point. And we would hope that we can get to a place where, the things that we're currently experiencing in this country and around the world, right? That we can get to a place where truly it's not there. Truly. Not to say that, it won't peek its head up, but truly having an opportunity or an environment where we can say, you know what, I got a chance. And I don't feel what I feel now, like the question you asked about, you know, what happens if you get pulled over, or what happens with being the only one in the room. No, like, hey, if BJ's qualified to do the job, then BJ do the job. You know what? When we talk about systemic racism, everyone understands what that means.
What it is. Yeah.
So right now we are in the very first stage of it is communication. Without communication, we can't even get to the cooperation. So we're in the first stages, and that's what you come to understand, because, there are a lot of good people that, got to see this through together, right? It's not just going to take one, it's got to see a lot of things. It's got to come together. So this is the very first step, which is you're seeing people beginning to communicate. And that's the most encouraging thing. People are talking about this because it's been here, it's been present. And all of a sudden, it took a scenario, or it took an unfortunate events to happen.
Series of unfortunate events.
To happen to say, oh, so again, I'm old enough to understand it. I'm old enough to hear it. And now is to play my role is to help this generation and to listen to them and help them so that we're still not talking about this 20, 30 years later.
What's your role? What do you want to be doing? What if you could carve out a space for you in this movement? What is it?
It's to listen. And listen, everyone, it's easy for me to get here and talk, right? It's easy for me to get here and this is what I did and this is why someone should listen to me. No, I'm just like everyone else, right? I'm living every single day. But with age comes experience. And there are some experiences now that I've had that can be beneficial to younger people, right? I've got some life experiences now, right? As a 20-year-old, I thought I knew a lot, right? 25, I was like sitting, I felt I was real good, right? There were some things. But at 50, I began to realize how much I really didn't know. And so what this experience now is to be able to share that. But in order to share it, you first have to build relationships with people so that they're open to your ideas as well as opening to their ideas, because this generation here are facing issues that I never imagined, right? I didn't have the internet. I didn't have social media. I didn't have Facebook and Instagram and all those things. So the issues that they have today, I can't just dismiss them and say like, as if they're like nothing. Mm-hmm. So I want to be able to learn what are the real issues of today growing up from the young people, hear their issues, and then be able to say, okay, I've seen this. Here's what we did, but here's maybe another way for you guys to look at it and try to look at it from this perspective. So that's why I see my role now is to be able to listen, cultivate those relationships with these younger people, because now, they have something now that's tangible. Oh, yeah. They have something now for the first time in quite some time where everyone got off of social media.
Yeah.
And this was a real moment for them. When I say real moment, a moment where it required people's presence to be there, whether it was physically, mentally, emotionally. People were taking notice of something that was going on off of the internet, right? It was like a real thing that was happening in real time. So with that, I think now we all have a shared experience. And now it's about strategically trying to figure out how to communicate these things and move this energy into a place and a space that will benefit all, so that we're not still here again talking about coulda, woulda, shoulda, oughta, and this is what happened in 2020, because it's important. Those events that happened, lives were lost. And again, when you become aware and you have awareness, you have an appreciation for life. And with that, you're saying some of those lives, you don't want those lives to be lost in vain. You don't want those lives to, as if, it's just, well, that's just happened. No, that just didn't happen. We have to make sure that moving forward, that we continue to, stay the course, keep on the path and stay focused on what we're trying to do here.
I would agree. I'd agree a lot. Everybody for the moment, everyone wants to talk about George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Taylor, and Elijah McCain, and there are so many. I mean, the list goes on, and we're talking long before even Emmett Till. But
Right.
Now we're at a place where you can put a name to it, and we all got to have that same experience at the same time to watch tragedy occur live, right? When you start to think about what the next steps are, we have these conversations and we communicate, everyone sits around a table and we say the same things that we personally have been saying for the last century or more. What does mobilization look like then beyond the conversation? Because we understand, we as people of color, we already have a full understanding of where we come from and what we've experienced. So now I believe that we have to look to what mobilization looks like. Do you have ideas or thoughts on what first steps are to begin to move toward progress and improvement?
Well, that's a massive question, and that's a big question. And I think your leadership has to be impeccable, and you have to have not only a leader but leaders in place who understand and can gain the trust of the people that they're leading. Mm-hmm. So I think the leadership within our own communities is of the essence right now. I think it's at a critical moment because, leadership, you can't do anything without it. And when you have people in place like a Barack Obama, for instance, or a Nelson Mandela, people like that, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and so forth and so on, the power of leadership and and when you have the connectivity with the group, it can be a very powerful tool. So what I'm looking for now more than anything is the leadership within our community to evolve to a place to where we can get ourselves organized so that we can not only talk about what we should do, right, not talk about these ideas, but we can actually execute these ideas. That's the key. And so again, I'm old enough to understand, those sound good. Those are good sound bites.
Exactly.
But I'm looking now for the leadership. So, the one thing that I want to invest with the young people is helping them to understand how to organize themselves, how to have leadership qualities, how to understand how no relationship without trust, right? There will be none. So now we're at this point now where we all are aware that it has to change, has to occur. But now how are we going to execute this? And that's going to involve the leadership, not only from just one person, right? Because, but from the leadership with all of us, the leadership of all of the communities, the leadership and being responsible and holding yourself accountable, because the leadership is truly with the people. So it's going to take everyone to really have an understanding of saying, here's the plan. This is how I feel connected to this plan. And this is how I'm going to play my part. And that's going to start with great leadership, great messaging, execution, and being able to really get the people all on the same page. So that's what I see as a prominent way to really get this into movement, because again, I don't want it to just be a moment. It has to be a movement where we can really truly look back on 2020 and say, this was a moment, this was a time where things really changed. And
where they started to change.
Things changed, and we really got things, and we were able to execute and do things in a strategic way that really made a difference, not only in our communities, but in the world.
Yeah.
Right. And that's because the one thing that is so unique to me throughout all of this is that, you know, we started this conversation about the NBA. The NBA has been amazing in this regard. You know, you see players in Australia talking about Black Lives Matter.
Oh, yeah.
You're seeing, you know, players in Europe talking about Black Lives Matter. You're seeing protesting in countries all around the world. And all of these people, the awareness of just, you know, you asked the question earlier, is the NBA doing enough? You're seeing this Black Lives Matter have a global impact all around the world. The Toronto Raptors, when they drove up to the bubble, on the side of their bus, it had Black Lives Matter right alongside the NBA and the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah.
So the awareness of what is going on, to me, has been probably the most amazing thing, is that you have people talking about something that we were, at people of color, we were aware of.
Yeah.
But we're having discussions now.
It's
a world conversation.
Right.
That was having. And now with this conversation, what are we going to do? And that to me is that's
where I'm trying to, you hear all the time, they come to, you know, I work in corporate America, and all the time they'll come to us for the messaging, the marketing, the, you know, what's the soundbite? What should we say? How should we respond? But what they don't ask us about is, what's the strategy for change, right? I think that when we get beyond the visuals, when we get beyond just the, you know, informative conversations, we've got to have a conversation about strategy. What is the strategy that's going to get us to change? And it's not going to look the same for everybody, right? But there are some key things that can happen, right? When we do address issues like police brutality, when we address issues like wage disparity, when we address issues like diversity in the workplace, and so many things. And what might be at the forefront of the argument for me may not be the same as the forefront of the argument even for you or for any one of our listeners. But if we're not included in the conversations on the strategy, how can we expect to see progress? I think if we're not a part of the strategic plan, then we are only going to see more of the same, right? That's when it moves from being a moment to a movement. And where I think athletes have and you correct me if you think I'm wrong, but where I think athletes, both like yourself, former players with these huge platforms, and current players, where I think the difference is that they have the platform, and to a certain degree, they have the power to affect change. So when we start thinking about where we begin to find leaders and what we look at for strategy, do you think that, I mean, I know athletes got a job, and it's a big one, you know, they're playing a whole lot of games and it's physical. But in addition to that, is there a way that the athlete can use his platform to advance the cause? Think about Muhammad Ali, right? He was very successful at it. Arthur Ashe was very successful at it. Colin Kaepernick has proven to be very successful at effecting change. Do you think that as we look for these leaders, can we look to athletes, or is that just too much to expect?
Well, again, you're talking about 2 or 3 people. And first, again, the uniformity of saying this is what an athlete should do. We just can't say all people do this, right?
Right.
I've had the good fortune. I a very short window. I met, you know, Muhammad Ali, and had an opportunity, to see, the people that we're currently discussing here, and that's who they were. So the authenticity of who you are will come across.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I'm an athlete, but if I'm just saying it because I think I'm supposed to say this, you will
See right through it.
see. Okay, and it's nothing wrong. Some people are boisterous. Some people are quiet. It doesn't mean that doesn't
Just
mean
go,
one.
go get out there and fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to give the people space to get comfortable with who they are, and because there's no preparation to becoming a star. Like no one there's no school that says this is how an athlete should act. There's no Muhammad Ali, okay, was able to do this, but that was part of his personality. Arthur Ashe, that was his personality. Kaepernick, that's just
I think that they would all argue that they felt compelled. They felt, I would think that they all had to step outside of who they, I mean, we know that Muhammad Ali was very personality.
but that's it. That's his personality. That's what I'm saying.
Right?
Some people are like, some people are comfortable in front of the camera. Some people aren't. Just because you're a good basketball player doesn't mean that you should be a spokesman. Like
Sure.
I'm good at basketball, but I may not be good at, my personality may be, I may have a Tim Duncan personality.
But
What's
what if
wrong with
your
that?
influence? What if your influence is so huge and you
well,
don't say something?
Well, what you're saying, again, again, I'm only taking credit for myself. I'm not impressed with likes and popularity.
Sure.
I'm not influenced by popularity. So just because on their platform, suddenly now I have access to millions of people because they have told me I'm a star player. Okay. I was a person before I put on the uniform, and I didn't have all these millions of people. And then suddenly now people can do whatever they want to do. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, for me, I'm not impressed. What I am impressed with is you're aware of what's going on now. You understand the community that you came from. I understand the community, but it starts with awareness first and foremost. Now you're conscious of what's happening. Now you can have discussions. Now you are beginning to, okay. And whenever that happens for you, it may happen at 19, some may happen at 27, some 30 something, but we can't put these people all in one box.
Because and to whom much is given, much is required.
Absolutely. But again, what we do know is that they're people.
They
and
are.
Where you have people, there isn't a requirement of saying at 17, BJ, you got to do this. We all mature at different parts of our life. And I deal with people. I deal with real people in real time and real issues. And with that, okay, I'm going to take you as you are. I'm not going to ask you to change, but when you are ready, let's work. When you're ready. And that requires patience. I have a 19-year-old son.
Yeah.
I got to let him make his mistakes. Me and his mom, we got to allow this young man to make his mistakes. I got a 17-year-old daughter. She's got to make her mistakes.
Yes.
She's got to go and date. And as hard as that's going, she's got to go do the things that a 17-year-old woman has got to go through so that she can get to 25 and we can sit there hopefully one day and say, remember when you did such and such, and we can laugh about it. And we've all been there.
No girl wants to be reminded of remember. I hate when my daddy says that.
But
we try to get over it.
I had to get over it. We've all had to get over it.
Yeah.
So the thing is, we got to allow these people to be here. But the one thing I don't want her to do is not for her to bring her problems, because she's got to know that her mom and her dad and her support that are around her are going to let her mature as she needs to mature. And he is going to mature. And then our youngest one is going to mature. So we all go through it. And that's what these young people, I see the
when
people.
They stop bringing you their problems, you stop leading.
You stop leading. And again, it gets back to the principle of the most important aspect of all of these things is the leadership. That's why, the people that I named, they have impeccable leadership. The Gandhis of the world and the Nelson Mandelas and, Barack Obama's leadership. Okay. All the parties and all that, his leadership. That's what sets things apart, is when you have leadership, true leadership, and the people can look at you and know that, okay, yeah, I see you. But at the same time, we have a responsibility. And I feel compelled and responsible and accountable to the essence of what we're talking about here. Not just, giving you rhetoric and just talking about it, but I really feel responsible to do something and do what we're saying we're going to do here to really make a change or really make a difference. That's what we're looking for.
Well, it sounds like a takeaway from today is the pros are people too, right?
Imagine that. Imagine that.
Just like the rest of us. And you know what? I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that, because oftentimes we don't see it that way, right? You see a public figure and you assume that his life is yours to intrude on, or her life is yours to intrude on. And it is important to know that just because you have a platform doesn't mean you need a microphone, right? Like, it's just not for everybody. And so I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. Before we close, I just want to know what's up next for BJ Armstrong.
Well, I think right now is really just trying to get through this pandemic.
Oh, you want to get past Corona?
Well, not so much past it. I think there's going to be a new normal, right? And whatever that new house wants to be, I want to be on the wave of it, whatever that new normal may be. And there's definitely a shift going on how we're going to, just for instance, the workspace, right? How we're going to work and how we're going to engage in public spaces and public environments. Will there ever be bands back at these arenas? How will we interact in public forums? I'm a huge music lover. Will we go to concerts again? Or will they be somehow remote or what have you, smaller venues, or whatever the case may be? But the most important thing is, I think there's going to be a new normal, the way the world is going to operate. And people are very resilient. People come up with amazing ideas. And through these moments, there's brilliance that always comes out of problems. So it's tough like everyone else. Look, I would love things to return back to how they used to be. But I've come to the conclusion it probably is not. But out of this, there's going to be some type of something that I can't even imagine or think of that was going to come from this, that's going to push life forward. Life has an amazing way of moving forward, and young people, they always seem to, out of thin air, they come up with these new ideas. So I'm really excited to see whatever is next is coming, because out of this problem will come an amazing idea. That I am sure of. And so I'm the pandemic and all of the things, I see it, but I do know that somewhere in some garage or some small room in some bedroom, some young kid has a brilliant idea that's
Oh, yeah.
going to make a huge impact on the world that we'll all be like, why didn't I think of
Why didn't I think of that? Yeah,
that?
I wish I had gotten into the hand sanitation business a long time ago. You know, they say, you know, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
So, you know, do you have any predictions about changes you think are coming?
God, I wish I was smart. I wish I was that smart where
Oh,
I could think that way, but I don't. I just, like the interactions, of the interaction thing to me is a big thing because, people are social,
yeah.
and human contact and all of those things. And I've done so many Zoom meetings now, they're becoming normal.
Oh,
And, the isolation of working from remote places and family dynamics and all of those things are changing. So um, we'll see. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how the advertisers are going to market to us, like what's important to everyone now, because we're kind of like in a holding pattern, right? Is this like how it's going to be, or is this just something that we're doing until we can figure out how to get past COVID-19? So I don't know, but what I do know is that every day I'm interested to see how it's going to play out, because
uh-huh.
someone's figuring is going to figure it out,
Yep.
and you and I'll hopefully we'll look back on and go, remember when we were talking about that? Well, this is what came.
This is what happened.
This is what happened, and that's how it works.
Well, that was a great conversation. BJ taught me a lot. I guess we have to all realize that everybody that has a platform doesn't necessarily want a microphone, and that's okay. I hope that you all learned something just like I did, and that you'll tune in for another episode of Teach the People. And remember, each one, teach one.